So as I was studying Wishing Forward, 7 Moments Jesus Prayed, one of the questions that I ended up asking and started a study on was, when does the voice of God speak? You know, if the voice of God is speaking, I think I need to be listening. And God really ministered to me by the things that I learned as I studied this. I found 11 moments that I saw that the voice of God spoke. Now, I'm sure that there's more. I don't intend this to be exhaustive, but these are some of the things that I learned. The first one was obviously found in Genesis 1 in the creation account, where it says the voice of God spoke. And then there was light. You know, when God speaks, creation happens. The second thing that I saw was in Deuteronomy 4:36. Moses tells us that the voice of God speaks in order to discipline us. He's not going to leave us hanging. He's going to let us know what we need to do. I saw also in 2 Samuel 22:14 through 16, David points out to us that the voice of God speaks in order to rebuke the enemy of God. So when the enemy of God is in pursuit of the children of God, the voice of God will rebuke them. And then in the time of Nehemiah, in Nehemiah 9:13, the priest reminded the people that the voice of God speaks to remind them that they're not to forget what God has already done in their behalf. They're supposed to remember. So we should listen to the voice of God so that we don't forget. And then in Jeremiah, I saw that Jeremiah 9, that the voice of God moves creation. Literally, that when his voice would go forth, that the oceans would roar. And in Daniel, we're reminded with King Nebuchadnezzar, he kind of went too far. And God spoke to him and said, you know, King Neb, your sovereignty is going to be removed. And in this, God wanted the people and that king in particular to understand, you know what? You are not sovereign. You're not in control. He's the one that's in control. So his voice speaks to remind us of that. And then in Luke 3:23, we're reminded at Jesus' baptism that he is the Son of God and that it's his son and that he loves him. He's well pleased with Jesus. So the voice of heaven spoke so that everybody would know that God was pleased with his son, Jesus. We're also told by Jesus in John that the voice of heaven didn't speak for the benefit of Jesus to hear it. It spoke for the benefit of man, for us to hear him. And then in Luke, kind of similar to his baptism in the Transfiguration in Luke 9, the voice of heaven speaks one more time and says, this is my son whom I love. Listen to him. So again, the voice of heaven declares that Jesus is his son and that we need to listen to him. And then in Joel, we are told that the voice of heaven will declare when Jesus returns. We need to be watching and listening and waiting. And in Acts 11, we are reminded in the scene with Peter, when Peter was on his roof praying one day, the voice of heaven told him to not call anything unclean that God has called clean. And this lesson, the voice of heaven spoke so that we would not have social and religious racism. So as I went through and I studied, I discovered that the voice of heaven speaks to create, to discipline, to rebuke the enemy of God, to remind the people of God not to forget what God has already done and to remember what he has done for them, to move creation, to clarify that Jesus is his son and that he's loved by God, and to benefit us, to help us. He wants us to hear his voice, and that we need to remember that he has chosen Jesus and that we're to listen to him and that we need to prepare for his return, and that as we interact with one another, we should have respect and honor because God created all of us. Yeah, I guess we should be listening to the voice of heaven, shouldn't we? Now that's a study worth thinking on and pondering and praying that we hear. I hope that you are choosing to listen to the voice of heaven. Shalom, y'all.